In the last few hours, Bitcoin has taken a bit of a move to the downside, dropping by over 2.85% in the last 6 or so hours. So in today's video, we're going to be addressing that. We're going to be taking a look at the technical analysis on BTC, where I'll be sharing my thoughts and opinions as to where I think that price action is heading next. Let's jump right down into the charts and take a look at what is going on with Bitcoin. So here we have Bitcoin paired up with USDT. We're on the 1 hour Binance chart here for BTC, and you can see we've had a pretty aggressive move to the downside. Now, for those who were following the previous Bitcoin videos that we're putting out, we were initially thinking there was going to be a move to the upside around $67,907 to $68,696. This was a refined area from our larger macro picture where we were looking between 66,353 to 68,662. Now you can see here on Friday the 27th at 1400 hours, we did tap into that range. So we really met those minimum expectations. We just thought that there was a potential move here for a little bit higher. Unfortunately, we did see a retest over the weekend going into Saturday here of the 50 EMA, 50 SMA. Initially, these were holding up really well until we got into the early hours of Sunday. Here we started to see there was a bit of a wobble in the market where we lost the 50 simple moving average, that's the yellow line, and when retested and also found a little bit of a wobble on the 50 EMA, that's the blue line coming through the chart here. We pushed up again a little bit late yesterday, so the weekly close position, and then since then we can see here we started to move aggressively back to the downside, where we did get a closed position on basically midnight UTC, coming in on those lows around 65,094. So you can see the bears really started to take control. We closed lower than the 50 simple moving average, the yellow line, and it closed lower than the 50 EMA, the blue line, and right now we've been testing out the 200 EMA here on the 1 hour time frame. So for Bitcoin, it's not looking the best at this particular point in time. And there's a few things that I want to kind of address here. Now, there's the potential possibility that we are in a really big impulsive move to the downside with a contracting diagonal happening over here. And there's a few rules for the contracting diagonals. Okay, so I'm just going to draw this in so you can see that visually. You can see how it kind of contracts down a little bit. And then we have the 3-wave move to the upside. So here you can see there's the 3-wave move going to the upside. And then, of course, you have this big impulsive drop to the downside. Our diagonal-based pattern, okay, so the wave 1 being here, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4, and then finally wave 5. In the contracting diagonal based patterns here, there's some interesting stuff that we have to kind of consider. Actually looking at it, I wonder if this is more of an expansion than anything else based on the wicks, but for the most part you can see the diagonals. Now when it comes to a contracting diagonal, wave 1 has to be the largest. Okay, so we'll have a small wave 2 situation coming in here as well. Let me find where those wicks are, and then your wave 5 must be the shortest. Under a expanding diagonal, wave 5 must be your largest. So it's interesting how this kind of structure here appears. Looking at it, I would say it's more of an expanding diagonal than a contracting one, with wave 5 being the longest. We're going to do some measurements on that just to make sure that everything kind of aligns to that kind of thought pattern. We go ahead and just check here. We actually can see that wave 5 is not the longest wave. So it's not an expanding diagonal, therefore it must be the contracting, and we just need to kind of place out where wave 1, 2, and essentially where 3 and 5 are. But to me, it does look very interesting. For the most part, you want to think maybe it's corrective like this in a 3-wave pattern. However, I don't think that fits very well because we've already hit the 1.618 level on this retracement right in here. As you can kind of see, the 200 EMA was right down here on the 200 EMA. The 200 EMA is the 1.618 level. Okay, so we can see that we are in a big impulsive move to the downside. Now, it's possible that it's 335 and it's just an overextension, but it doesn't feel right to me. It looks like there is some kind of diagonal going on here, but it doesn't appear to follow those rules perfectly. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump this down into a 15-minute time frame just to see where this one sits, as to whether or not we do have bigger kind of moves going on. And actually, interestingly, we might actually find that this is the diagonal in itself. Let me go ahead and do the due diligence just inside here, where we can see this kind of move. So let me go ahead and measure this distance right here, pull that over. Here you can see 1.382, so not 1.618. 1.618, but we can see 3 waves. We bounce up and then we move down. So it does meet the idea of diagonal. It just doesn't kind of reach those kind of levels that you'd normally typically expect. So it's one of those. I'm going to call it an inconclusive structure just for now, and we'll see what happens next with Bitcoin to kind of anchor that in at a later date. Okay, it's a little bit complicated because there's so many rules, but for the most part, all the rules I can think of in terms of this structure here, they don't really follow. The only one that does is a 3-wave pattern. Okay, so I think that's probably the most probable situation, but then the 1.618 is a little bit of a worry as well. So I'm going to leave that off until we get confirmation, and we'll get confirmation on a couple of things. Any price action above this swing low of 65,430 will basically mean it was just a 3-wave pattern, and it was basically a breakout structure at that point. So that would be good. And so for clarity, that would basically be the idea that we have something to this effect, just be very irregular. In terms of the structure moving to the downside, it does look like we're finding support at the moment on the 200 EMA. And there is the idea that this has kind of potentially completed off a 5-wave pattern. Again, I'm going to drop this down into a 15-minute time frame just so that we can see this structure in a little bit more detail, because we want to be aware of any potential changes. So here we can see a very interesting kind of overlapping structure, finish, bounce, then drop. Okay, and we want to measure that distance. Okay, and that distance is quite important for us to understand where we currently sit. Here you can see that it has come down deeper than 1.382, and so typically lower than your kind of typical ranges where you find 1-to-1 ABC structures sitting between 1 and 1.236. So this is also a bit of an interesting area where we do expect further downside. Our main concern will be at 63,973. That's going to be an impulsive breakdown where we then start thinking that this here meets those kind of larger requirements of bigger, deeper retracements. And then, of course, we are at that point really kind of be talking about whether or not this is a diagonal at that end and we are trending to the downside. Okay, so at the moment, it's still up in the air as for whether or not we can find support. If we do find support on the 1 hour 200 EMA, or we drop down a little bit lower, this is going to be a bit of a wobble area for Bitcoin. Okay, now taking a look at where we found previous resistances and support could potentially be found in this range. We can see here that we are already in the range of previous resistance that can turn into support right here. Okay, now my issue is that if I go ahead and draw on here, we have this previous area of resistance right inside here a couple of times. Okay, we came back down, we found this as support, and right now we potentially are finding it as support, but we have closed quite deep inside here, whereas before we hadn't done so. So we want to be aware that this particular range that sits between the kind of low side of 64,133 to the high side of 64,745 is basically a point where we could see either selling pressure start to mount up, or buying pressure really start to get us a bit of a move to the upside. Now, there are some concerns over some of the kind of the warning signs. I know a lot of people are calling for all-time highs. I've not been calling for that necessarily this year. I do think there's a higher probability of moves to the downside, and I think that's really where the danger zone comes in. If we lose this area of 64,133, the next kind of major areas of support are going to be found significantly lower as we kind of think about 63,000 down towards 62,000. And of course, if we lose those, well, the drops then start to become a little bit steeper, and we start talking about $60,000 at that point. Okay, so I want to be aware there's a lot going on with Bitcoin, some potential moves here that could be worth trading. So for example, our momentum on the smaller time frames are indicating a bounce, which is fine. So with support being found here on the 200 EMA at the moment, we can be thinking that maybe if we can get a positive close now, a long position is something that we can kind of consider, stop loss lower than a previous swing low. But Elliott wave theory tells us that there's actually another move to the downside before we get into that. So I want to be aware that there's potential here for a bit of a shakeout in the market. Now, if we turn the stochastic RSI off and bring on the relative strength index in the form of a divergence indicator, not that it appears to want to load for me today, so that's a little bit of a problem. Okay, so I can't check that. If we bring our volume profiles in, you can see volume profiles increasing dramatically as we have this sell-off. That's not what you want to see. So again, volumes are supporting the idea that there's a continued move to the downside. Less of an appetite for buying, specifically as we kind of went into Friday and over the weekend. And then you've got today basically being a mass sell event for BTC. I don't know why the divergence indicator is not working. So that is potentially going to be a bit of a problem. I'm just going to go ahead and check my VPN because I know that sometimes the VPN can be an issue for some of these indicators in TradingView. So I'm going to just switch that over and we'll then go ahead and remove it and just add it back in, and hopefully that will get everything up and running again for this one. So let's go ahead and see if it's on my list in here or not. It doesn't appear to be so. So let's go ahead and put that back onto the chart. There we go. All right, so with our divergence indicator, I'm just going to go ahead and merge this up to the existing pane that we have here. And there's a few settings on this, by the way, guys. I might as well just walk you through what is going on. We want to see the hidden the bullish divergences and the hidden bearish divergences. We want to see those. I don't really generally mind keeping this on the 14 period for the RSI and the source being closed. Now, anyone who's been around on on the channel for a while will know that I prefer the 𝗕𝗪𝗪𝗔𝗂 over the closed positions. Both work well. 𝗕𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 is open, high, low, close, divide by 4. Essentially gives you the average of the price of the day or the hour or whatever time frame you're on versus a closed position, which only ever takes the closed position into account. So I prefer 𝗕𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗂, but for the purpose of these videos, I usually just keep it on standard so you get the same results if you are applying these things. So as you can kind of see, we have that. I'm actually going to go ahead and change the style of our RSI into a yellow line as well. Okay, so on this 1 hour time frame, our divergence indicator here has gone right down into the oversold area. We did have some hidden bullish divergence. This was basically on Sunday. And this basically saw that little mini surge to the upside. This is one that we were kind of talking about potentially trading, and we did see that working out quite well. And we can see these hidden bullish divergences actually playing out quite nicely on the 1 hour time frame. But for the most part, we are looking for a bounce. The question is, are we going to be finding support on the 200 EMA or not? So let's roll this up into a daily time frame. Here we can see the stochastic RSI, the relative strength index here, the RSI, is taking a bit of a turn to the downside. This is very much in line with our expectations. Turn that off and bring on the stochastic RSI. You can see here that we had the negative turn and we're finally dipping down after being aggressively overbought for quite some time. This is in line with our expectations of those bigger, broader moves. Our volume profiles obviously have been decreasing as we've had the push to the upside into our targeted range on the daily time frame, guys. Our C and Y wave structures, we're looking for that 66,353 to 68,662. And basically we got that and rejected. So although we were hoping for a bit of a push to the upside, ultimately we're seeing the rejection now, and it does look like that's holding. Although the volume in the last 2 days is still low, we'll be looking to see whether or not the sellers are going to be increasing the volume like we saw on the smaller time frames on the daily time frame. That's going to be a watch as well. Our divergence indicator, as I said, is starting to take a turn to the downside. So we'll see whether or not momentum is major shifting or whether or not that's going to hold up. But for the most part, we are kind of just tapping into those higher ranges, which again is a lower low and a lower high here on the daily time frame, indicating for the move to the downside. In line with what I've been talking about for a while, I'm looking for 40 to 44,000. I hope that doesn't happen, but that's the range that my kind of bearish kind of fears are kind of talking about at the moment. So that's the possible structure that I hope doesn't play out. I hope that we don't do this, but if we do, that's the range where I think the biggest amount of support and volume is going to come back into Bitcoin. Outside of that, we are going to be looking for the 200 EMA to be hopefully support. That comes in at just short of $60,000 at 59,876. So that's going to be a key area for Bitcoin. Lose the 200 EMA, then we're going to be talking about minimum expectations really coming down quite aggressively towards $49,000 Bitcoin. So there's lots of hope. There's lots of areas where potential support can be found. Should the market really start to wobble, I think we're going to be in for a bit of turbulence when it comes to the price action of BTC. There's a lot that I've gone through in today's video. There's lots of hopes around maybe not being in some kind of impulsive breakdown on that 1 hour time frame. Obviously, we'll know more about that in the next kind of 1 to 2 days. So again, watch out for the next Bitcoin video. And there's a lot of hope that maybe we don't have such a significant pull to the downside on that daily time frame, although the fears are very much real. You guys can let me know what your thoughts are on all of this in the comments down below or in our Discord server linked in the description. We would love to hear from you. If you found today's video useful and informative, smash that like button. If you're new, subscribe. And don't forget to check out this video right here. It's not one you're going to want to miss.